All right, we're live. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here this evening. My name is Oshunbumi Fernandez West, and I'm the CEO of Odunde. Tonight's guest, I'm so honored to have her, State Representative Donna Bullock. I'm so excited to have you, State Representative. Thank you so much for joining us. Convo with the CEO. I just want people to know the woman behind the title. So many people just think that you are, a public figure, and I want people to know who you truly are and let people know about your upbringing because there's a story behind everybody. So that's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about all the wonderful things that you're doing in your community, in your district, the things that the Black Caucus is doing. So this is just an open forum for you to tell people all that you're doing.
All right, I'm excited. Thanks for having me on tonight, Boomy. You're my friend, my girl, and it's just cool to be able to talk to you in a different forum.
Yes. So Donna, so you call me State Representative Bullock. Call you that, your title. Where did you grow up?
Well, since tonight is all about who I am behind the title, we can just use Donna tonight. We friends. Okay. So let's go there, make it easier. I grew up in Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. I grew up in Central Jersey in a city called New Brunswick. I grew up in a single parent household for the most part with my mom. My grandmother was around, it was me. It's the three of us for the most part. But I'm a Jersey girl that fell in love with a Philly boy, and fell in love with Philly.
You don't fell in love with my brother Otis Bullock. That's you don't fell in love with. But we won't get into that. We're gonna get into that later. But so you grew up in New Brunswick, Central New Jersey, right? So you went to elementary, middle, high school, all in Jersey.
Yeah, I did all my public schooling in Jersey. But when I was in high school, I randomly applied for this scholarship to actually study across overseas.
Okay.
And so I spent my senior year of high school in Germany, completely like out of the blue. I didn't know German, didn't study German, just straight up went to Germany for my senior year. It was the best experience like ever. Because if you think about it, I was really like a Jersey girl. I have never been anywhere. I didn't know, I'd never been out of the country before, let alone the only time I've been out of the state was like on a school trip to Philly or New York. So this was a huge experience for me. I spent my entire year there, came back on the day of graduation, graduated and got a scholarship to go to Rutgers University, which was my home, right in my home city. And I was happy to be back home. I was so homesick, but it was a great experience. And I think like a lot of us don't get that chance to get outside of our neighborhoods, let alone outside of the city that you grow up in or the country. So it was eye-opening for me.
Yes. And so I think it's so key what you said about exposure, because that's what it's about. It's about exposure, especially for our children. They needed to see that there are 7 continents, and there is a plethora of countries that you can visit, and I think it's so key for our children to see that and to know that.
I mean, it was crazy. I mean, I was out there. I'm the only Black person in this town in Germany. There was one other Black family from the Congo, but we had totally different experiences, right? And I was the only American. So it was this really small town that I lived in with a family. I think the town was less than 5,000 people. I was like, there's 5,000 people in my block, maybe in Philly, right?
Yes.
Or at least in my neighborhood in Philly. But it was just, I had to learn a new language. I had to learn new culture. I was staying with a single father. So that was completely different for me because I grew up with a single mom. So here I am with a single father and his daughter. And it was just a really different experience for me.
Donna, how did your family allow you to go? I never heard that. Look,
the one thing about me is that you couldn't tell me no then. You couldn't tell me no now. I was a really precocious little girl even then, my family struggled, like many families did. And we had our moments, but I was always this little precocious little girl. And I put my foot down and my mom just knew there was no way of getting around it. Like if I was determined I was going to do something, I was going to do it. And the host family, the host father was amazing. He was, he didn't know what to do. He was an older gentleman. He had his daughter was 17. I was 17. He was just trying to keep these two 17-year-old girls, in school or in check. He could tell us what to do. We ran that house, but it was fun. Learned the language, and I thought I came back home.
Donna, how did you learn the language?
I studied a lot of languages when I was growing up because I used to want to work at the UN. I thought I was going to be an interpreter. So, I really loved languages.
Okay.
But my best language ever was German. And even I never really studied it in class because when you have that total immersion in a culture and a total immersion, you have no choice. I was going to school, and had to learn it. My host father knew no English. And so it was just the daughter knew English. And so we got along very well and she interpreted for me, but you have to learn it to survive. And it really gave me an appreciation for other people who live in the United States and learn English as a second language. That was a real experience for me, and be able to take that back. And look, if you don't use the language, you lose it. So don't ask me to say much of German now, but it was a great experience, one that I would never take back. I gave up the prom and I gave up all those senior trips and things like that to have this experience. It was an experience of a lifetime.
Of a lifetime. Do you still stay in contact with them?
Yeah, so the father has since passed away, but I do stay in contact with my whole sister. And she, so we try to email now, or we write letters and send pictures of our children. We're both married with children and all of that. So it's it's been cool.
Oh, that is great. So you said you got a scholarship to Rutgers. What did you study?
So I studied administration of justice, and which is similar to criminal justice, with a political science minor, and I took German, of course, that's my language.
Yes.
Because at that point that was my most fluent language.
Okay.
And most of my work in school at that time was really surrounding like my community, because I went to school in my hometown. So I was able to connect all of my studies and my extracurricular activities to things back home. So for one example is my connection to a soup kitchen back in my hometown that, my family relied on when we were struggling. And I was able to do some volunteer or courses where I got credit for doing work with the soup kitchen, and bring all of that, back home for me.
Back home for you. So then, so what after you finished at Rutgers, did you go on to law school? What was your next step?
Yeah. So so when I was at Rutgers, I also worked full time for a program called the Youth Advocate Programs.
Wait a minute, Donna, you work full time and went to school full time?
Man, you got bills to pay.
I know that's right.
You got bills to pay. You got to figure that out. And I was still supporting my mom whenever I could and trying to make sure she was okay.
Yes.
So yeah, even though I had a scholarship for the most part for undergrad, I still had to take care of myself and take care of my mom.
Yes.
So yeah, I was working full time pretty much my sophomore through senior year. And in my senior year, I was actually the director of the program. But I was working with youth that were, involved in the criminal justice systems or family court. And I thought I wanted to, work with juvenile justice and things like that. So I went to law school. I got a scholarship to come to Temple. And it was a public interest scholarship to pursue a career in public interest law. And I just, when I first visited Temple, I brought my mom to Philly. And Temple was so inviting. They spoke with my mom, even though she didn't understand this level of schooling that I was getting into, but it was no pretense. It was just so warm and welcoming. I was like, this is the school that I needed to be at.
Yes.
And I was excited to come to Philly. I thought there were a lot of things about Philly that reminded me of my hometown. It was like a big city, but still with all these small neighborhoods. Right?
Yes.
And so, I came to Philly. I met my husband in law school.
Okay, so you met Otis at Temple.
Yeah, we met at Temple. So we were both interested in public interest law. And so we would end up at all of these different workshops and orientation or events about how to pursue a career in public interest. And I kept seeing this freckle-faced guy in the room, right? And so I had an opportunity to get what it was a summer internship called the Martin Luther King Fellowship. And so it paid for your summer internship at a public interest organization. And so after I secured my summer internship, I said, hey, Otis, I heard about this summer internship program. I know you're interested in public interest work as well. You should consider applying for it. And so we ended up both in that summer internship program. And it was an opportunity for us to get to know each other a little more.
I know that's right. I got your internship boot. Got you an internship.
That's my internship boot. But the funny story is that I wasn't interested. Look, and he'll probably see this later, but I wasn't interested in Otis at the beginning, right? So when we got there, we all got assigned to our different internship placements, which were in Philly or Pittsburgh or wherever, but we met in Harrisburg for our training and orientation.
Yes.
And while we were there that first week, there was this other guy from Howard Law School, you know, and I was like, oh, he's fine. Right? So I was trying to talk to this guy.
Don't get yourself on trouble on Convo with
he know. So, you know, I was trying to talk to the guy from Howard Law School when Otis tells me, he's like, he wasn't even worried. He was like, ain't no competition. He's like, dude, gonna go back to Howard.
Right,
you know, he was like, he gonna go back to Howard, and he was like, and then at the end of the summer, it's gonna be me and you. And he was right, you know, and not even that, like in between our orientation and our final week in Harrisburg, I was still like checking in with Otis, like, hey, what are you doing for lunch? Since we both were working in Philly, and we would have lunch and things like that during our internship that summer. And, you know, eventually I started to realize that I liked him, even though I was trying not to admit it.
That was wonderful. So you both, you can educate me. In law school, you had to pick for lack of a better word, a major, for lack of a better word. Do you have to? Are you studying? Is it general law? How do you specify what you want?
Well, you don't necessarily pick a major in law school, but you know there are folks who come to law school and say, "Well, I want to be a corporate lawyer, or I want to be a tax lawyer, or a family lawyer." Okay. And for many of us, we came to law school wanting to change the world. Okay. Right. And so there's this space that we call public interest law, and those are folks who end up going to be a public defender, or they work for community legal services and places like that. And so there weren't, you know, when you're trying to do that, your sort of mind frame is a little different from others who go to law school to kind of make money, right? We weren't really interested in making money. We wanted to make a difference. I remember like doing that, saying, hey, I came to law school, I want to make a difference. I want to change the world, you know, whether you want to be a civil rights lawyer or all those things. And my best grades were in courses like tax law. And I was like, tax law, how I'm gonna change the world with some freaking taxes and corporate law. But what I found out, what I started doing was representing nonprofits, you know, that were doing work in the community, because those nonprofit corporations, you know, they have to get their 501c3, they have to get all their other paperwork together. And a lot of that is tax law, some corporate law, real estate law. And so, I mean, I eventually moved into a space with my law career where I represented, you know, small and large nonprofits, anything from your small community civic association to a large hospital or university. Those were the kind of clients that I had. So I really enjoyed that work. Like you imagine general counsel for Comcast. Well, I was general counsel for the community association or for the local child care center or the, you know, the elderly center or something like that.
Yes. Wow. I mean, you really wanted to get back.
Yeah. I mean, look, for me, you know, I talk a little bit about my childhood in the way but I mentioned that soup kitchen. You know, when my mom and my grandma were struggling and we were going to the soup kitchen, you know, my grandma used to be like, look, you may be small, you may not have a lot, but you're here. And after you finish this meal, you can get up and you can help out. You know, no matter how little you think you have, there's always something more you can give. And so when I became, you know, I was fortunate to be a little bit smart, fortunate, enough to get some scholarships and go to college.
Donna, you were brilliant, honey. You got a scholarship to Rutgers and law school, honey. You were brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was fortunate enough to get into, to have those opportunities. And the first thing I wanted to do was make sure I used the resources and the skills that I had to give back. So I've always been about volunteering, had always been about giving back and finding a way to shape my career in service of others. That's just, it's in my DNA. It's who I am. It's who my mom and my grandmother raised me to be. And if you've ever met my mom, and folks laugh all the time because my mom is, she's just a good-hearted person, very simple, lifestyle, but no matter what, she's always trying to help somebody else. So she stays on SEPTA, helping somebody else. She'll be in Love Park trying to help somebody, or when the gallery was open, old gallery, that was her hangout spot.
You gonna say the gallery, you done dated yourself. You gonna say the gallery.
Look, that's how long I've been in Philly. I mean, Philly is home. And even so much that I moved my mom out here when I knew I was going to make Philly home. I went and got her from Jersey and said, hey, this is home. This is where I'm going to be. This is where you're going to be. And,
Donna,
people see her all in the neighborhood.
Donna, I know that's right. Love your mother, Donna.
Yes. So, I mean, look, I put roots down here and I brought my roots with me.
That's right, Donna. You better, because you need that foundation You need that person that you know has your back no matter
Yep.
what. You understand?
Absolutely.
Because that's the same thing I
Mm-hmm.
had in my mom. So I truly understand what you're doing. So Donna, so as you finish law school, let's talk about what are some of the trials and tribulations you have faced in your career, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, so for me, like I started working at Community Legal Services, and it was a great opportunity to work there, but you don't make a whole lot of money. You end up realizing you qualify for the same programs as your clients. um
Wow.
but it was good work, but I had
Mm-hmm.
student loans, I had debt. I wanted to do more. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to represent bigger clients, so I had an opportunity to work in a small woman-owned law firm, and that was great too. But what really started to kind of itch at me a bit was I needed to be more in the community.
Okay.
And so I had this opportunity to work for Council President Darrell Clark.
Okay.
Um, and I think when he and I first started talking about me working for him, I was 8 months pregnant at my old job, and he was like, "Okay, well, when you drop that baby, come see me." And so, and I did. After I had my second son, I reached out to him and I was like, "Look, I really need to be more in the community. Like I feel working in a law firm, I wasn't connected as much to the community as I wanted to be."
Okay.
And this allowed me to be connected to civic organizations and the people that were coming into City Hall, and to think about, how we can work with the issues that they were facing, and how we can, you know, um, draft legislation or policy that responded to things that I was seeing coming right in the door.
Yes.
Um, and so we never had to get to a lawsuit. Some of the challenges, I think, as any woman was, as I started to have a family and all of that, trying to figure out, well, what's next for me, like,
Okay.
am I comfortable being here?
Yes.
Um, I was that girl in high school that you probably didn't like, because I thought I was going to be president one day, and I used to wear heels to school because I never got taller than 5 feet, so I always wore heels I was like, I'm dressing for the job. I'm dressing for them. I'm wearing my heels and my suit.
Yeah.
And so I always thought, like, I guess in some way I was going to be in some kind of leadership role, but and I pursued, different fellowships and programs and training about how to run for office. I even used to hold these breakfasts and brunches at my house to encourage women to run for office, but never thought, really that it was for me. And I think a lot of women go through this. We're like, man, I don't know about running for office. What about my family? What about my children? Am I the right person to run? Will people look at my history? Will people bring up my past?
Yes.
As women, we're very critical about that. Will people vote for me? Am I the most effective person for this? Is there somebody better than me for this position? Let me tell you. So there's statistically, they say you have to ask a woman 7 times to run. 7 times.
Yes.
You only got to ask Timmy and Tom once for them to decide, yeah, I'm gonna run. You don't even gotta ask them. They'll just put their name out there. Ain't nobody asked you to run, Timmy, but Timmy will put his name out there to run.
Timmy put his name in that hat in a minute, won't they?
Yes, they will. I mean, they will volunteer themselves to run. And when I say they, I'm referring to mostly men, and when I say that, mostly white men will happily put their names out front. When nobody was looking for you, nobody was checking for you.
Yes.
And you may not be the right person to represent this community, but they don't ask those questions, and they don't go, they don't go through that analysis that a lot of women are very self-critical of them, as they go through that. And I did that too. There were several times that people had asked me to run, and I was like, no, I have this great position. I'm working in city council with the council president. My children are home. I love being a mom and a wife and all those things. I'm still, still looking out for my mom. But then you look up and you realize one day, like, all right, well, these kids can tie their own shoe.
Yes.
They can go to the bathroom, and they know how to put some food in the microwave.
Yes, they do.
What are you doing? Everything that you can do for your career, for your community? Are you living to your fullest potential? And I had to start having some of those questions, for myself. And when the opportunity came for me to run for the state rep seat, it was like a quick check-in, like, hey, Donna, here's an opportunity. Here's an opening for you to pursue something that you probably should have been thinking about for a while, but you kept putting it back on the burner. And even now, being elected, there are opportunities that present themselves, and I'm constantly, second guessing whether or not I'm the right person to pursue another, elected office or opportunity. And I just wish that myself and all women that we didn't do that to ourselves, right? Because we have such great skills. I mean, look, we manage whole households and calendars and dietary restrictions in our own house, and we can do this. Like our voices are needed at the table. Not only that, I think the skill sets that we bring around negotiating, around compromising, those are the kinds of things that are missing when you look at our political leaders. Is that sense of compromise and that sense of looking out for others and caring for others when we're drafting legislation and policy. Unfortunately, I see a lot of self-interest in that space.
Wow. Because I was going to ask you, Donna, as you wear so many hats, you're elected official, you're a mother, you're a wife, you're a daughter. How do you find balance in all of that? How do you find balance in all that?
I'll be lying if I said I did, and then that's the myth. A lot of times, you see these conversations and you have women come out and talk about, career life balance, and they give you all these tips. And the real honest truth is that it's hard. It's real hard. And let's just speak on it. Like some days I'm doing real well. Some days I'm gonna pat myself on the back like, yeah, girl, you did that. You had dinner on the table by 5 and you got your work done. But most days it's not like that. A lot of times, like most working parents and particularly working moms, we are struggling to make it all happen. And we go out, our super mom cape on, and we put on the makeup and the hair's done and we look like we all put together, but sometimes we're not taking care of ourselves. So how do I balance it? I mean, I have some tricks. I thank God for some of the virtual resources and services we have that allows me to FaceTime my children when I'm away, that allows me to send them Uber Eats when they want a home cooked meal, that allows us now, my kids were used to some digital learning because we were already doing that in the sense that that's how I was helping them with homework when I'm in the Capitol.
And so Donna, we're going to talk about that because when you are at the Capitol, you are spending 4 days away from home, 4 or 5 days away from home. Am I correct?
Yep, it depends on the week. It could be 3 or 4 days a week, and that can be hard on your family. And when I first got elected, my boys were 4 and 7 years old, and my husband is amazing. He was there, he stepped up to the plate, but he has a full-time job that and a whole organization and employees that he's responsible for. I have I'm blessed with a mom who steps in when she can, but as they got older, that became more of a challenge for her. But they also grew up in this space, so they've become more mature and responsible. And it's a lot on them. Sometimes, that means dragging them out to a meeting when kids ain't trying to be in your community meeting. I thank God for a Kindle, because back in the day, that's how I kept them occupied. As long as we had Wi-Fi in the building, they was all right. But they've been exposed to a lot in this role, right? I think that's the blessing in is that their exposure to what's happening in our city, in our state. They've seen that, and they've been, they have front row seats to some of those conversations about policy, those conversations about how we look out and care for our neighbors, and they've been right there. And I think they also understand our family's legacy for service, going back to my grandmother's quote about no matter how small you are or how little you have, you can give back. And I think my boys know that now. And so my youngest, he's all about that social justice work and giving back. And, he's anytime he can, he's out there trying to feed the homeless, or even arguing with me or his dad down about something that he feels very passionate about. And, I see that in him. And I'm like, okay, that's going to be the one. He's the one. But I know that he has those opinions, and he feels confident about expressing them because of the exposure that he has had. But, no doubt about it, this being in this space and being a parent and being a wife, and wanting to dedicate yourself to those things first is a challenge. And I tell folks all the time, like, yeah, I'm your state rep, but I was a wife and a mom first, and I will always be those things first. And so I prioritize my family over that work. But I also have, real conversations with the folks that I represent, because I should want the best for my family and the best for your family.
Yes.
Right. And if everything that I vote on, everything that I work on in the house, I have in the back of my mind, how is this impacting my boys? How is this impacting my family? And how is it impacting the boys and girls that they go to school with, the boys and girls that they play soccer with, the boys and the girls down the block? How does it impact the other families in my community in North Philly? How does it impact the families that I go to the grocery store, the dollar store, the bottom dollar, the Save a Lot? Because when my constituents catch me in the Save a Lot, they be like, "Rap," I'm like, "Yeah, I'm broke too. I'm trying to save these dollars too." And I understand just as much as you do how hard it is to put food on the table and to care for your family and to do those things and to make sure you're, making the best use of your resources. How important it is to have a grocery store in your community. How important it is to have all these other resources in your community, because I live right there too. How important it is for me to pass legislation that's going to keep our community safe. I'm always thinking about my boys, always thinking about, you have 2 boys too, right?
Yes. 3 boys. Yeah,
3 boys, and I'm always thinking like about their safety when they step out the door. And so when it comes to issues like gun violence and police reform, I know I'm raising 2 Black boys in North Philly, and when they walk down the street, don't nobody know that that's State Rep Donna Bullock's son.
Listen, and that's what me and the twin sister Docs were talking about one time. Dr. McDonald told me, when my son walks out of his school, his private school, they don't know that his mother's a doctor and his dad owns a financial firm. Like, they don't know that. You understand?
They don't know
that's so key about that. But Donna, let me ask you a question. What do you do for downtime? What do you do to recharge yourself? What do you do to reboot yourself?
Oh boy, I haven't been great about that either, but I'm trying to be better, right? Because self-care is so important. I watch a lot of junk TV.
Okay.
Like just mindless TV.
Yes.
Netflix has been the devil with me lately because I will find anything to watch.
Yes.
I do try to, I like to ride my bike. So more leisurely, I'm not like some out there racing kind of, cyclist or anything, but I like to, ride my bike through Fairmount Park and sometimes hike with my boys, and get some outdoors, get some time outdoors. I really enjoy doing that.
So Donna, how do you deal with the people who might say, or some of your constituents might say, "Oh, you're not doing nothing for us. My schools are still bad. My streets are still bad." How do you deal with that from your point of view?
Right. That's always hard. What I've realized first and foremost is that folks are frustrated. Folks want to live in neighborhoods that feel safe, neighborhoods that are clean. They want their children to go to schools that are educating them and that are keeping them safe. They want housing that is affordable and housing that is suitable. And and the same thing. I know those frustrations, and so I try not to take it personally. I try to explain to my neighbors. I try not to refer to everyone as a constituent. They're my neighbors. I see my constituents as my neighbors. And how can I sit down and say, okay, let's look through these issues. Let's look at what the issues are, how we can solve them, what's my role, what's the community's role, and who else has a part in this. I think a lot of times those frustrations come from not knowing how to get the solutions. And I also understand that my neighbors have been complaining about these issues forever, right? And for years after years, and not seeing those results can be discouraging. It can be frustrating. It can be downright like you can feel disrespected in a way, like nobody is hearing me. And so first I need to listen, and then after listening to those constituents and those my neighbors, having some empathy. And for me, that's not too hard because I live in those same neighborhoods. I'm right here in Strawberry Mansion, and I see those same things. And trust me, I am just as frustrated, and I'm trying to work as hard as I can to get the things done to improve my neighborhood and improve the neighborhoods around me. But I know that there's so much work to do. Look, we're in Harrisburg, and I know like not a lot of folks been to Harrisburg or understand how the Capitol is, but it's 253 legislators between the Senate and the House, right? The Senate is 50 and the House is 203. I was elected in 2015. I always tell this because for me, it just kind of sets the stage of what I'm dealing with. When I was elected in 2015, there were 9 Black women out of those 253, just 9 Black women, okay? There were 13 white guys named Mike. 5 years later, we still only have about 9 or 10 Black women. That's it. The numbers never changed.
Wow.
So when you talk about, and why do I say that? Yeah, okay, and we also had about 20 Black men. But why do I say this? Because it makes a difference about who is there and how they see us.
Yes.
When you don't understand what a stop and go is, then you don't understand why we need to change legislation around alcohol and liquor in our communities, right? Because you've never, the way stop and goes operate in Philly, that term does not exist outside of Philly. Okay, so
when you go to rural Pennsylvania,
when you go to rural, you go get your beer. You
they don't have them.
That loitering, that kind of culture of a stop and go does not exist outside of Philly. You might see it in some of the other smaller cities, like in the Harrisburg or places like that. But really, it's a Philly thing. If you don't understand what it means to be a minimum wage worker, because 2/3 of the minimum wage workers are women, and if you look at the numbers of who are Black, there's a high percentage of folks who are Black women or Black folks that are working a minimum wage, then you don't understand why we need to increase the minimum wage, because you don't see yourself in that space.
You can't connect.
You can't connect.
Yeah, you can't connect. So if they can't connect, how do you expect them to support it? And so what you're saying is that if you create policy that trying to help the average, minimum wage mother, if the majority don't understand that, it's going to be very hard to pass that law, pass that policy.
Right.
And that's what people don't understand. People just think that you, Donna, and all your counterparts can go up there and just change the world just like that. But it does not happen like that.
No. First off, we have to get a majority on most of those. You got to get a majority vote. I can't pass legislation by myself. Right. Right now, Philly, some parts of Lehigh Valley, the suburbs, and Pittsburgh, that's where all the Democrats are coming from. Everything in the middle are Republicans, and that makes a big difference too about policy. So we're in the minority, right? We're not going to pass anything unless we get some Republicans to support the legislation we're doing. When it comes to bringing issues to the table, I don't know if they were talking about issues like Black maternal health care until someone like Morgan Cephas came and started talking about it. That they weren't talking about Black women losing their lives giving birth. It wasn't even.
I don't mean to be blunt, but they didn't care.
They didn't care. And so when you say you needed to change the policy or how we fund, midwives, and how we fund doulas, and how we provide additional supports to Black women, through OBGYN and all that other work, it wasn't on the table. It wasn't even on the radar. Wow. And now we're having those conversations. Wow. Now we're having other conversations about even hair discrimination, right? So my sister, Joanna McClinton, introduced a bill called the Crown Act. It's something that is happening across the country.
Yes, it is.
Because we see that, sisters and brothers who are wearing their hair and natural hairstyles being discriminated against because of that.
Yes.
So not a conversation other folks are going to have if you don't see that. In fact, how about some of my colleagues don't see Black folk till they get to Harrisburg? So let alone they see somebody that got braids or locks or a fro.
And if they do see Black folks, it's only what they see on TV.
Right. So those experiences, and when I have those conversations with them, like, really, people discriminate you? Because I'm like, yes, people discriminate against folks because of their hair. People make assumptions about who that person is, what they're about, or and where they come from based on their hair. Yes. And many other conversations that we are having now, because we have Black women and Black men in Harrisburg. But not only that, we are in leadership in some of those positions. Joanna McClinton is now our leader. Jordan Harris is our whip, and in the Senate you have Anthony Williams as the whip, Senator Hughes is the appropriations chair. So while we are in the minority, within that minority, Black folks are in the leadership roles, which is really, really powerful. And I think
that's very powerful if your numbers are just 10% of the number.
Yeah, we're moving up.
Yeah, so
right. And that means we're also seeing that our issues, and this gets into my role as Black Caucus chair. One, we're getting Black members elected from places outside of Philly, and that's huge. Black members are getting elected from Montgomery County and Delaware County. There was a gentleman that ran in Chester County. He didn't win, but hopefully next time he'll win. We got Black folks representing us in Lancaster, in York County, and then we got Black folks out in Pittsburgh and other parts of Allegheny County. Guess what? we're out here leading, but
Mm-hmm.
we're also recognizing that there are Black and brown communities all throughout the Commonwealth. And so
Mm-hmm.
by raising that issue with those other representatives who may not have Black and brown skin, but represent Black and brown people, we're
Yes.
raising those issues and saying, hey, you got to recognize that these issues matter to your constituents. You got 20% or 30% of your constituents are Black and brown people, but
Yes.
we don't hear you talking about those issues that impact them. And you
Yes.
can no longer hide behind this shield saying that's not my district. No, this
Wow.
is your district.
This
Your
is your
district is
district.
changing.
Yes.
And if you don't respond to your district, you're going to miss out on, you're going to, your district is going to respond to you and you may
Yes.
not get reelected, right? That's a big thing to look at. So there's some, a lot of issues we're looking at across the state when it comes to that. Some of the schools and experiences that young people are having in schools outside of Philly,
Mm-hmm.
where they are in the minority in those school districts, where their school districts are still underfunded,
Mm-hmm.
where discipline of minority students happen at a disproportionate rate in
Compared
comparison
to
to their
yes.
white
Yes.
counterparts. Those experiences for those students, we need to, be responsive to and help
Mm-hmm.
in any ways that we can, and look at legislation and policy to help them. When we're looking at our prison system across the state and how that system not only takes men and women out of our families and communities
Mm-hmm.
and puts them in these state prisons, none of which are in Philly. There's not one state prison in Philly.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but all of those folks are being housed and incarcerated in
Other
other
counties.
counties.
Yes.
Um, and how does that impact policy? Let
Mm-hmm.
me tell you real quick, it's something called prison gerrymander we don't talk a lot about, but those folks for census purpose, we all just completed the census, they
Yes.
don't get counted where their family is. They get counted where they put their head down. So
Wow.
so
So
those Black,
that's how it's a domino effect in regards to affecting policy, in regards to affecting the county and the money.
the
Yes.
money, because the census determines where representation is. So it determines whether or not they have a congressman there. It determines the boundaries for a
Mm-hmm.
district, right? But it also determines where to send resources.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say you have this many people in your district or in your township, but 10 or 20% of them people are living in your prisons, and then if you're claiming that you have a minority population that you really don't, because that minority population are the people in your
And
prison.
yes.
And there's so many layers to that.
There's
So
so
many
many.
layers to that.
And so, and you know what's so funny? People don't know the what you deal with on a daily basis. You know what I mean? I was listening to some of the KYW. They were saying how in a lot of the in our urban areas, a lot of them they couldn't complete the sentences. They couldn't complete the census because a lot of them have access to computers, no access to Wi-Fi. The cars never got to them. So a lot of this is done on purpose. Now, people, I know some people don't want to say it, but a lot of it's done on purpose. So therefore, their numbers are not counted. And again, it can affect the amount of funding and resources that their communities get.
Right. I mean, if we looked at the
It's
census,
been going on for decades, for generations. It's been going on. You
yes,
know what I mean? And nothing but
access
the
to the
grace of God.
census, being able to complete the census, language accessibility for the census
Yes.
for folks, intimidation, particularly for those who feel like if I fill out the census, they're going to come deport my family.
Yes.
Um, and we also know that, with this year with the pandemic and the challenges that the census presented, whether you did it digitally or you wanted to go into an office to help
Mm-hmm.
get
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't available. People couldn't knock on your doors necessarily,
They
and
could not.
they
No.
couldn't help you,
That's what they were
fill out,
talking
which
about.
is,
Yes.
and then our former president, he cut the timeline to complete the census short. So
Wow.
all of those challenges that we had, we couldn't even get extensions to make sure that people had ample time and the information they needed
Mm-hmm.
to complete the census. I can tell you how many people in my neighborhood was like, I'm not filling that out. And it has so many conspiracy theories about why they shouldn't fill
I
it
ain't gonna
out.
lie.
And I'm
I
like,
ain't gonna lie. People say like that they're gonna come and cut. I ain't gonna lie.
they got
I
my
ain't gonna lie.
information.
I mean, I completed it,
I
but
love your
I know
people.
I hate the conspiracy. It's the
But
same thing about the vaccine. Like due to the Tuskegee Airmen and the different things that have happened to our ancestors. I can't. I mean, and I've been told by many of my friends that it's okay to take the vaccine. You're just scared to because what they have done to our ancestors. So that's what it has done. But it should not stop us from doing what's right or to keep our community or our family safe. So let me just say that.
unfortunately, our communities have so much distrust,
Yes.
and with reason. with government and elected officials and other outside, put it bluntly, the racist institutions of that this country was built on. You know, whether from banking to healthcare, so many of these institutions have misused and abused our community's trust.
Yes.
And so now when it comes to bringing out the good stuff, whether it's a vaccine or getting yourself counted for the census or even voting, right? You like, I don't trust it. I'm not gonna do it. I mean, we had people back in the day that was hiding their money in their pillows because they didn't trust the bank, right? So all these things, even, you know, when we're trying to get people to apply for programs, whether it's a property tax exemption and things like that, is hard. We see so many of these envelopes get returned because folks don't want to open anything from the city. They don't want to open up any mail from the state. You know, like
it's not funny, but you are telling the truth.
True. I know my people. Look, and I understand, you know, and so the government and all of those institutions have a responsibility and an obligation to rebuild that trust. And look, it's hard. Look, when you break up with somebody who did you wrong and they're like, come on, baby, trust me. Well, for some of us, it take a whole lot more to build that trust back, right?
Yes, it do.
Some of us, we go in, but a lot of us, it's like really hard to build that trust back with somebody who did you wrong, like did you so dirty. And unfortunately, that's the position that a lot of these institutions and our government is in. Y'all did our community so dirty for generations.
Yes.
It is baked into who we are to second guess what comes our way. But I will say that, you know, I think there is a new generation of leadership, myself and a lot of other folks that's coming out of Philly and throughout the country, that I think we are trying to do what we can to rebuild that trust and to actually just take back some of that leadership and build policies meant for our communities.
Yes. So as we wind down, Donna, I have one last question for you. Dr. Warlaw's here. She was saying that about the accurate information about the vaccine. But she is true, and we have to make an informed decision about that. So thank you so much, Dr. Warlaw, Twin Sister Docs. Thank you so much for that comment. But as we wind down, I want to ask you a question. What advice would you give the 21-year-old Donna Bullock? What advice, as we wind down, our last question for tonight, what advice, living life, all the life that you have, what advice would you give the 21-year-old or the younger version of Donna Bullock?
I would say, don't let other people decide your career. You know, I think that I spent a lot of my time trying to please other people and make other people happy and doing what I thought I was supposed to do, that I didn't do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. So, you know, chart your own path and, you know, being a dutiful, you know, daughter, dutiful, you know, student, all those things you can be. And respectful, but you have to chart your own path and
be true to yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Be true to yourself.
Absolutely.
Donna, this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Like
so
you
much
said, the time went by so fast.
Yeah, it went back so fast. We have still so much to talk about, so maybe we'll come back down for part 2.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
So you're watching Odunde 365, Convo with the CEO. Tonight, our guest was State Representative Donna Bullock. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for telling your story. You have a wonderful story. I hope that people were encouraged and inspired by your story. May you continue to do well in our community, represent our neighborhoods, represent your district. And thank you so much, Representative Bullock. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Gumi.
You're welcome. Okay, everybody. We'll see everybody next Monday at 6 o'clock for Convo with the CEO. Thank you for joining us.